And also, an hour and 27 minutes talking about the dinner party? My God, when are they running the country? Not. Obviously, they're not running the country, or we wouldn't be in the mess we're in. They're too busy censoring art. What precipitated this was an incredible dream by the trustees of a university in Washington, D.C. One of the trustees also sat on the board of Through the Flower, my tiny little nonprofit arts organization that is still touring the dinner party and caring for it, and then keeping it in storage, protecting it, placing Birth Project work, and touring the Holocaust Project, my tiny little organization. I used to call it small but mighty. Anyway, a woman who sat on our board and sat on the board of the University of District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., which was a land-grant university that happened to own an old Carnegie library that sat at the end of the mall. They also had a collection of African-American art. And she proposed to the trustees, and they enthusiastically accepted the idea of turning the Carnegie Library into a center for the celebration of the struggle for freedom for African Americans and feminists, women in America. And the idea was one side of the museum would house the dinner party and art and artifacts about suffrage movement, contemporary feminist art, and the archives of important women. And the other side of the museum would house art by African Americans, artifacts, archival material that celebrated the civil rights movement. Well, my God, this did not go over well in Washington. First, there was a misrepresentation campaign by the Washington Times. I'm coming home. We flew to Washington for the gifting ceremony of the dinner party. And it was going to happen on my birthday. And the day before my birthday, we had flown in the night before. I went to the gym, as I often do in the morning. And I'm coming home, and there in a kiosk in the Washington Times on the front page is a picture in color of me and the dinner party. And it says, UDC's indigestion. University going to buy the dinner party with taxpayer funds. Total lie. Complete lie. And in fact, the university was going to get $4 million in private donations in art and money to underwrite this wonderful dream. Anyway, I already explained to you how misrepresentation is a tool of censorship. You are completely powerless. All I and my supporters could do was get the dinner party out of the line of fire. So I rescinded the gift to UDC, and the dinner party went back into storage. Okay. At this point, I think that you have gotten my point about the many forms of censorship. So I think what I'll do is just tell you about the rest of my work. I kept working as an artist. I did one more collaborative project called Resolutions, A Stitch in Time, in which I worked with my longest-time needleworkers to reinterpret traditional proverbs for the future. We were facing the millennium, and there's this guy, William Bennett. Do you know who he is? He's a right-wing pundit. He used to, I think, have a White House appointment. But he wrote a book called The Book of Virtues. It was a right-wing how-to book in terms of the decline of values that we all see. No matter progressive, conservative, we see the decline of values in our culture. And the right wing is not the only place where there is concern. It was just that it really griped me that all of William Bennett's suggestions for how to turn around the decline in values involve going backwards, especially for women. So also, after his incredibly successful book and television series, it turned out he was revealed as a compulsive gambler. I'm like, good, tell us what to do. Perfect. You're the exact person to tell us all what to do. Don't you think that's funny? I think it's hilarious. Anyway, so I thought it would be fun to do a modest and playful project, also addressing the breakdown in values. In fact, I studied Proverbs, and there's a guy who's an expert on Proverbs, and he said that when one generation, younger generation, doesn't know the Proverbs anymore, it signals a breakdown in values. And so the Proverbs that we adapted have to do with a new kind of world, adapting to the future, and suggesting that those Proverbs provide a path for us to, for example, envision the little needlework samplers that are usually used that say home sweet home, that only have to do with your personal home, that we could envision home as our planet and imagine a world where we all live together in our diversity, in harmony. The project, Resolutions A Stitch in Time, opened in 2000 at the Museum of Art and Design in New York and traveled to 8 venues. The project, which is divided into 7 different values that seem to be the basic values of human society. There are different images in each area, and the exhibition concludes with a full-scale carved wooden sculpture with a needlework technique that goes around the spiral and is in the heart, called Japanese gold embroidery. It's a fantastic technique that combines silk thread and gold thread. And in the spirals around the base of the figure, which has its arms outstretched, is of indeterminate gender and ethnicity, every person as you will. And it says, find it in your heart in 22 different languages. Now, this was a big challenge, actually, translating into different languages. The woman who did the Japanese gold embroidery, Linda Patterson, is Chinese, and her mother speaks Chinese. So we got the phrase translated into Chinese. We thought it was right. She sent it to her mother to check, and her mother goes, oh my God, it says find it in your liver. Okay, could I have the next? And since 2003, I've been working in glass. I love working in glass. I'm working in cast, etched, fused, and painted glass. My first series were around the hand, and I was interested in how one hand gesture can mean the same thing. It can mean come here, extending your hand. It can mean stop. And then glass allows you to look through appearances, and I think that you can see that that's one of the things I've been interested in is what lies below the appearances of, for example, the idea that our museums are level playing fields. And the next series I've been working on are heads. The first series was called the Toby heads, and I began to bring back in some of the techniques I've used before, like bronze and porcelain. That the Toby head here is called Toby head with golden tear, and that large Toby head on the right-hand side combines glass and bronze. Could I have the next? And here's me spraying, since I still spray paint, back spraying the glass aspect of the Toby head. Now, before I close, and we have a little time for questions, let me tell you about another form of censorship that is alive and well in our universities, okay, and in the art world. Another form of censorship that relates to my work is the fact that most people don't know much about any work of mine except the dinner party, as if that was the only work I ever did. This is not just my own experience. This is the experience of many women artists, where their work is seen, only a small portion of their work is seen. I recently wrote a book about Frida Kahlo, who of course is known for her self-portraits. It was a huge discovery to me when I was researching on Frida Kahlo, that her production is small, only about 200 works, 80 of which are self-portraits, but 40 of her paintings are still lifes. And very little has been written about her still lives. Moreover, there are a great number of themes in her work, which I only discovered when I was working on the book. She's done work on her relationship with animals. She's done work on images of the doll, which relates to work by other women artists, which you never see. You never see her work put into the context of other women who have worked on the subject of animals, including me, Rosa Bonheur. Many women artists actually have explored not the relationship between humans and animals, or painted or sculpted their companion animals. There's another example of seeing only a portion of a woman's work is a very famous example. You may not be familiar with Merritt Oppenheim. Merritt Oppenheim was a surrealist whose career spanned 80 years, and yet until very recently, the only work she was known for was the small fur-lined teacup that was on display as part of the surrealist exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art until they reinstalled their galleries. So I'm not the only woman artist whose work is seen not in its entirety. Another form of censorship of women's work, so that you are not able to see the entire production of a woman artist, but only a small portion of her oeuvre. Another form of censorship is that I get letters all the time from young people saying that they're not learning about women's history, and if they do learn about women's history, they learn about it as an add-on. That is, there is history. And then there's women's history, the little class that's taught once in a while in a small, impoverished women's studies program. Or there's art history. And then there's women in art, taught once in a while in a small, impoverished classroom. Also, the history of the feminist art movement is not taught, has not been integrated into the curriculum of most art history programs. It has not been integrated into the exhibition policies of most major contemporary art museums. And as a result, young women do exactly what I recounted in the dinner party, which is what Gerda Lerner, the pioneering women's historian, described as the tragic cycle of repetition in which women are caught. Because we cannot build on the achievements of our predecessors, we reinvent the wheel. I see this all the time in the work of young women artists who work on themes that were opened up in the 1970s and they know nothing about it. And usually a lot of the work that preceded theirs was stronger than theirs, so they are not building on that work, they're reinventing that work. So censorship is alive and well, and it takes, as I said, a myriad of forms. Thank you very much. Okay, now we have a few minutes for questions. What I'd like you to do is, and then there are some of my books available for those of you who want to learn more about my work and my ideas. But if you want to ask a question, please stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question. If we can't hear you, then someone will bring you a mic, okay? Do we have some house lights that can come up so I can see everybody? Yeah, great. Okay, questions and comments? Mm-hmm. Who are you? Can you hear her in the back? Okay, where's the mic? Here comes the mic. Wait, they're going to pass it back to you. Beto's going to pass it back to you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Start again.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Nancy, start again.
Okay, it's Sandy.
Oh, Sandy. See,
Reed.
I couldn't hear you
I'm an
either.
undergraduate. I'm a returning student, and I'm in the Women's Gender Sexuality Studies department here at CSULB. And I'm so glad that you came, and we're very excited. I'm actually doing a senior paper on feminist art, and you're included in that paper, I might say. And so one of the questions that I have for you is, what is it going to take for women's art to be seen? I mean, what's it going to take? Do we have to go to the larger museums, the smaller museums? Do we have to, you know, say, where are these women artists that we've been hearing about? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, the first, you know, one of the reasons you know about Frida Kahlo and Georgia O'Keeffe and some of the early women artists is because of the 1970s feminist art movement and the agitation that took place in terms of, and also the interest among young art historians and artists in our predecessors. And so even though it's not acknowledged that it was the feminist art movement that brought those women into visibility, that's what did it. Because I remember in 1965, when I was a young artist in Los Angeles, my dealer had a 24-foot Georgia O'Keeffe cloud painting hanging in his gallery on sale for $35,000, and not only could he not get anybody to buy it, he couldn't get anybody to look at it. So, you know, one of the things that has, of course, ceased to happen is political activism. I know that many young people feel like that you can't change things, and, you know, that's real. I'm really glad that I was raised in a household where my father taught me that you can change things, you can change the world, but you can't change the world one at a time. You can only change the world by concerted, collective action. So there are two ways, probably, for those changes that we're talking about, and the changes are institutional changes. There's been a huge change in consciousness, huge. But the problem is those changes in consciousness have not been translated into permanent institutional change. So, you know, there have been several decades now, of feminist agitation inside universities, trying to integrate women into the curriculum, trying to integrate feminist thought into the curriculum. But, of course, the institutions have pushed back, and feminist studies, just like gender studies and Hispanic studies, African American studies, you know, all of the voices of those of us who are left out of the mainstream dialogue, the universities have started pushing back, pushing us out again. So they'll have to be pushing again by many, many people. There will also have to be changes in scholarship. For example, you know, there's no law against writing about women artists instead of male artists. There's no law against writing about artists of color. But what happens is that you have to buck a system that rewards upholding the status quo. But you know what? In my opinion, life is not worth living if all you do is go along with the program.
Wonderful. You were terrific tonight. Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments?
Right here.
Oh, good, right there. Okay, could somebody bring her a mic? Where are you? Where are you? Stand up.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can everybody hear you? Okay, who are you?
I'm Linda Ross, and I'm a retired school teacher and an artist.
Okay.
I'm so glad to hear what you had to say. Thank you so much. My question is, who in the art establishment now is encouraging women? How many gallery owners, how many museum curators are in a position or interested?
Well, there are many more women curators, gallerists, and museum directors, but not all of them are willing to take risks because of what I was saying. We have a reward system that rewards going along with the status quo, not making waves. And in fact, it'll be interesting to you to know that in my career, women did not always support me. In fact, when Henry Hopkins showed the dinner party at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, a male director, he had to override his female curators who were opposed. When Michael Botwinick at Brooklyn decided to show the dinner party, he had to override his female curators. Now, what this has taught me is that we in the 70s, when we developed our dialogue, we developed an incorrect dialogue. We assumed that all women were friends and all men were enemies. And that isn't true. As a result, we befriended some women who were our enemies and alienated some men who were our friends. And what that teaches us is that it is not just a question of gender, it is a question of values and coming together around shared values. And actually, my collaborations over the years are about people coming together because they shared my values, working with me because they shared my values, even if they were criticized for doing it. People came to work with me on the dinner party because they shared my belief that it was important to teach women's history, and that teaching women's history through art was a potent mode. Needleworkers came to work with me on the Birth Project because they felt strongly about the value of their lives as women and mothers, and they wanted to assert and affirm the power of birth as a positive value. People came to work with Donald and me on the Holocaust Project because they believed that they shared our belief that it was important to teach about the Holocaust, not just in the Jewish community, to make the words never forget meaningful, instead of because they could see, looking around our world, that not only have we forgotten, it's the opposite. We've learned to do it better. People came together with me in resolutions because they felt that it was important to teach values through art. And people have stood with me as an artist and supported me as an artist because they shared my values, irrespective of their gender. Okay, there's somebody way in the back. Let's see. They're bringing you a mic, I think.
You commented before about the necessity of having collaboration in these things. In order to have a movement, you have to have collaboration. And yet, in many ways, there's a lot of splitting up here. We're talking about a woman, we're talking about art. We should be talking about the subject itself. The subject itself is all.
We should what? We should be talking about what?
The subject of itself. The subject itself is the fact that there is this censorship across the board. There's censorship in Congress, there's censorship in the government, there's censorship in the economy, and we should all be collaborating from all these different points of view in accomplishing less censorship, rather than being split up by the media and the separations that we do in the schools. We separate. Art is a separate thing. Women are a separate thing. Men are a separate thing. There's a humanity here too, and we're all involved in the same fight, and we should be talking and collaborating from the broader spectrum in order to accomplish anything.
I don't disagree with you, but let's go back a little bit in time, okay? When I was coming up as a young woman artist, one had one-man shows, okay? One-man shows. The history of Western civilization is a history primarily dominated by white male Eurocentric perspective, okay? We come from a place where the singular white male experience has been presented as universal. You are absolutely right. The goal is for us to come together as human beings, but not as if we were all the same, not under the rubric of as if we were all white men. And that is what was required for a very long time. The question is, can we collaborate in all of our true diversity? Okay, how about one more question, guys, and then I'll sign books. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so the person with the mic gets to decide who's the last. Okay, you got the mic. Sorry. Okay, who are you?
My name is Elise. I just received my MFA here last year, and I'm involved in an artist space in Pasadena called Craftswoman House. It's obviously modeled after Women's House, yet I know very little about Women's House. I was wondering if you could perhaps give a few sentences on how Women's House started and why it ended.
Women's House was a temporary exhibition, and I'm going to do better than that. I'm going to tell you to go on throughtheflower.org and rent the Women's House film, because why should I tell you in 2 sentences what you can discover in 40 minutes as a really rich experience made by the filmmaker Johanna Dimitrakis. Throughtheflower.org. Or go online and type in Woman House. There's been a tremendous amount of writing on Woman House. And I don't believe in depriving anybody of the opportunity to do independent research.